It's the camping ban, which was the subject of conversation with the City Council in January, has become an ordinance, and is the topic for our discussion today on Austin Faith Dialogue. Also, right after that, the City Council moved to exempt religious organizations from their drainage fees if they contributed to the plight of the homeless. How this all comes about and what this means for us, stay tuned.
This is Austin Faith Dialogue, a public affairs program discussing the important crossroad of religion in life, produced by Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KTBC TV. Austin Faith Dialogue highlights the interaction of the religious community with the social and cultural issues throughout our area. Now, today's edition of Austin Faith Dialogue.
Hello, I'm Richard Thompson of Austin Faith Dialogue, welcoming you to this edition. And today we are going to be dwelling upon the subject of the camping ban, something that the City Council did back in January. For some years, the City of Austin has struggled with the issue of homelessness. City officials have sought to address one aspect of this problem by constructing a pavilion near City Hall as a place where day laborers can gather to obtain employment. But at the beginning of this year, an ordinance was passed to prohibit sleeping or laying bedding down in public places. Soon thereafter, the City Council passed another ordinance by which incentives are given to religious organizations to expand services and shelter to the homeless through exemption of drainage fees. The city estimates that there are 500 religious organizations which pay something like $290,000 in drainage fees annually. We're going to be focusing today upon both the drainage fee exemption, which would be a way that the religious community could cooperate in this matter, and on that original camping ban decision. To help us understand this, we have City Council member Jackie Goodman with us. We have Charles Merrill, pastor of University Methodist Church, and we have Rose Lancaster, who is on the Community Action Network. And we welcome you all to today's show.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I would like to ask you, Jackie, if you could just give us a little bit of a background of how this camping ban ordinance came about.
There were a lot of neighborhood folks and a lot of business people who wanted something done. There had previously been ordinances about carrying alcohol in certain areas of the city, and that was in response to some of the homeless people who would panhandle or be a little rowdy around places of business or in the parks, the green belts by the neighborhoods. And so they wanted something done. This was a response to that, not one that I agreed with, but it was a response, some kind of signal to be sent.
So that decision by the council was not unanimous?
No.
But it was in response to a growing public disorder kind of thing?
Yeah, a presence that needed to be addressed somehow.
And then how did that lead to this approach to the religious community? What's the transition there?
Well, it was just a series of actions. Those of us who did disagree with this as an answer, with the camping ban as an answer, because of no space for holding people, no shelter for legitimate and helpless people who didn't want to camp out. The next step was trying to get a task force together to look at the whole picture and see what the answers were that we could actually, as a city, feasibly introduce. And then a church came in who had been charged more than their fair share of drainage fees over the years. It had been an accident and they were miscalculated. And in the course of that, we found out that the state had said you can exempt all churches from any kind of fee like that. So we thought, okay, we can draw some attention back to the homeless issue, trying to find resources, even if a small amount here and a small amount here, to try to address some of the needs that we're going to try to facilitate. And that means some bricks and mortar kinds of answers with not a whole lot of resources. So it was a gesture, and it was also to acknowledge some of the things that the churches already do. Many churches help, and they don't really get acknowledgement from us for that.
Now, there was an original article in the newspaper that made it seem like the churches were not doing all that they could. Do you remember that?
I certainly
Chuck?
do. And we had a pretty strong response to that article because there are a significant number of congregations in this city who are doing a lot. And particularly when the cold weather broke in on us, we found ourselves housing anywhere from 90 to 150 people a night. But even in the other parts of the year, there's a whole coalition of congregations that take families and children in and help them get on their feet. The problem is not that the religious community is not involved, even though we perhaps could do more. I think there's a serious formal principle involved here. And I'd like to speak to that when we have a chance.
Okay, well, why don't you just summarize what
Well,
you think
I
that
think
principle is?
I affirm Austin's commitment to growth. I affirm her seeking out new industries in this sort of business. But if Austin is going to commit itself to the present state of American economics, I think we have to realize that in American economics today, there's a major fallout among people. American economics uses people up in such a way that it's kind of like sawdust on a cutting room floor. And people can't be used like that without being responded to responsibly.
Okay, so you're putting the homeless issue in Austin in a broader context
Yes,
in that way.
yes.
Okay.
And this is going to continue to grow. This is not a problem that a drainage fee abatement is going to deal with. It's just not going to. We're going to choke on this problem eventually unless we do something with it.
Okay. Now, Rose, you're on the Community Action Network. Explain what that is and how that pertains to homeless issues.
Well, the Community Action Network has 11 partners, including the city, county, United Way, AISD, but also have brought some of the corporate Chamber of Commerce. I'm there as a representative of Austin Metropolitan Ministry. So for the first time, the religious group and faith groups have been brought to the table to discuss some of these community-wide problems. I think after the initial response of kind of dismay the way the drainage fee was presented publicly, the churches have then, or those of us that are represented, saying, let's handle this as a problem, and let's look for the solutions, and let's be part of the solution, but not for the churches to be doing something over here all on their own. They just have to be part of the whole. And I find the drainage fee as a potential to cause attention to churches that are not already involved, to come together and with our strength find that part of the continuum that churches can do, that is feasible for churches to do. And we're in the process of doing that now under the Austin Metropolitan Ministries to facilitate a coalition of the church and faith community that have received this challenge, I would say, from the city about the drainage fees. But that's all just beginning right now. I think there's a potential there.
Okay. Well, I think for folks who are looking in and maybe not have kept up with all the articles that have been in the paper in the last several months about this, it might be helpful to just be specific about what it means for a church to be exempt from a drainage fee. And, you know, is that a practicable kind of thing to do? If you're trying to address the homelessness, even in a small way like this, how's that supposed to work?
Well, most churches will be paying a very small amount to the drainage fee each month. So
This is on a utility bill.
yeah. So everybody should go look at their utility bill and kind of check out the different things and see how very small it is. Some churches are larger and pay more and they have more property and so on and so forth. But it really is probably about a $25 a month contribution to city funds. But it is an acknowledgement that there is an issue, that in some small way, some churches who couldn't really do anything like some of the others where they actually have nightly homeless shelter and they have folks who come in and help supervise and help comfort and all of that. Some of the smaller churches who couldn't possibly do that and don't really have the money themselves to give a great deal to some other program could at least throw their $25 into a larger pool of money and match it with 25 of their own, so that even a small church might be able to handle an additional $50 into the pool. It's in no way put forward as as a solution to the problem. There, if you talk about the kind of pavilion with temporary shelter that Orlando has, that was a $3.5 million pavilion. And although we're not looking at that kind of investment because we don't have the resources, $50 towards anything makes it more of a difference than $0.
Okay, so the theory is that it's better to do something than nothing, and that we can't maybe match what Orlando has done in the way of a great pavilion, at least as far as city funds are concerned.
Right.
But that for a local church, if this is in effect, if somebody from a local church says we'd like to participate in that, don't they have to sign some affidavit or something that is then presented to the city? And how I don't want to get into great detail on this, but just it's a new kind of thing. Can a local church treasurer handle that sort of thing? What do you think?
They have to sign an affidavit, and they give it to the coalition. In this instance, if Austin Metropolitan Ministries is designated as the facilitator for this, churches would give the affidavit to Austin Metropolitan Ministries, who would compile them and send them to the city. Then the city staff would present that. They would keep a record of that. But first, this coalition has to present a plan to the Community Action Network to see that it fits in the larger plan, to see that it's, there are certain regulations. You have to make more beds, for example, is one of the regulations to use these funds. So the CAN has to validate it, I would say. Then the city has to validate that.
Wow.
Then churches get their waivers. It sounds complicated,
It
but I
does.
think it could happen in a period of a month.
You think it could be put into effect in a month's time?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying? I'm wondering if you wouldn't be spending $290,000 of city officials' time following up on this. It's just,
See,
well, I don't know. It's just, you know, initial impression, yeah.
I just really have a problem with it. I mean, I understand the intention, and I think it was a good intention, a goodwill sign or a symbol, but I think it has incredibly just limited use, quite frankly. And by that I mean Austin consistently, as a city, as a culture, refuses to face up to the cost, the human cost of the way in which we're trying to live. And I mean, we have plenty of money to do other things. I mean, to develop the city, to pursue our economics. This is going to be a major cost in the way in which we live. It's going to be a human cost, and we have to deal with it the same way we deal with water and environment and air and all the rest of it. People stack up in America, the way in which we do business.
Okay, so now you're returning to your
Yes.
overall view again.
Yes, yes.
You don't want us to lose sight of that, do
Well,
you?
no, I really don't, because it seems to me that unless we operate out of first principles, we're going to continue to shortchange the problem. And in this case, the people get shortchanged.
Well, I think this is one of the things that I sense maybe some consensus on, and that is that whatever's happened in the way of this drainage fee approach is just a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that we need to look at the whole picture. What would be a responsible way to address issues of homelessness in Austin, Texas, holistically?
Exactly.
And one of the limitations we're running into in that regard is time. We're just about having to take a break.
Yes.
So let's hold that until we pause for just a moment. You folks stay with us, and we'll be back soon on Austin Faith Dialogue.
Serving Austin means serving you. That has always been the primary goal of Austin Metropolitan Ministries. We are religion in action through the work of these organizations. Each plays a key role in making the capital city a better place to live, but we can't do it alone. Do you have some spare time, talents, or any resources that you can share? If you do, please call AMM at 472-7627, because serving Austin means serving you.
Welcome back to Austin Faith Dialogue, where today we are reflecting upon the issue of the camping ban as a symbol of the plight of the homeless in a larger sense. and an attempt of the city to work with the churches in a way that we've been discussing in the first half with Jackie Goodman from the City Council and Charles Merrill from the University Methodist Church and Rose Lancaster from Community Action Network. I think, Jackie, the thing that was left hanging a little bit after our first half is what would be your vision of what could be done by the city in cooperation with the religious community and other parts of the community to more adequately deal with this issue of homelessness, maybe in the context that Chuck was talking about. What's your vision? This is a religious show. Give us a vision.
Right. Okay. Well, I think our traditional partnerships have got to expand because, as we heard earlier, if you're looking for economic development and well-being of your city, those folks are also neighbors and community members, and all the resources that we can bring to the table are pretty critical because there are many needs that the word homeless doesn't let you know really how many areas of need to be addressed in different ways. There are, I'm sure you've heard Richard Troxell from House the Homeless talk about the continuum of care needed for a detoxification program, a recovery program, job training, and then some counseling and follow-through, in addition to shelter. So that's a part of the homeless issue that has to be addressed in some way. Then there are the families who, with or without both parents, are out there. There are children's needs, and that's a different thing from a single male, for instance. And especially one who needs medical care or continuum of recovery care. Then there are the youngsters who are out there, runaways or what have you, who are young adults. They are immature. They are trying to hook up with some sort of family structure within a very loose homeless arena, and that's a whole different area to look at. So you need, among those people, you need emergency shelter, you need transitional shelter, you need short-term shelter, and you need affordable housing that after everything is said and done, the cycle is stopped through an ability to have shelter, to have a job, to have some sort of security. And all of that goes into the word homeless. So in order to address any or all of those needs strategically, we need everybody at the table.
Okay, now one of the things too that as you describe this vision, the reality of what we run into, it seems like every day in Austin with the announcement, we're running out of money or we're short of money. We don't have enough money to do, you know, this kind of thing, much less keep the potholes repaired. So how do you reconcile that vision with the reality of the way things are now?
Well, again, you have to be pretty creative and look around to see what resources within the community or outside of the community have not been tapped that you can conceivably bring into the mix. Not only cold, hard cash, but facilities or ideas or connections or just brainstorming on what exactly we can do strategically. The camp place or pavilion or whatever we want to do to allow somebody to go legally and camp out somewhere is one aspect. A family shelter that could be within a facility that already exists but perhaps is not available to us. And then programs and resources for young people is, I think, the sort of thing that we're trying to look at, strategically using our resources to the maximum capabilities. And those, I think, are feasible, as long as you have everybody together talking about how you do indeed implement these things, or what you can do that's not quite perfect, but that will make a difference here and now.
Okay. Well, thank you for giving us that sense of what might be. What, as you listen to this, Chuck, would you add or change or what?
I deal with people's lives all the time, and I want to make the case that there's plenty of money around, and that the human needs in this culture tends to get dealt with convenient money. I mean, if it's convenient, then folks will be willing to give some of that money. But we're laying hundreds of miles of new concrete. We're doing all kinds of things to advantage some of us when increasing numbers of our people are going down. There's plenty of money in this city to do what needs to be done, it seems to me.
Okay, now you're saying there's money if we tax ourselves
Sure.
more.
Or or the religious community perhaps can call our city to a higher level of responsibility, and we can do this on a level of agreement and cooperation and voluntary kind of joining together, or we'll do it some other way.
You mean the religious community asking the city to reset its priorities?
Yes, or working through nonprofits, contributions to nonprofits, or really calling the business community into a new kind of a partnership with the living life of the city.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of ways to do this. It doesn't have to be taxed, but it must be done.
Okay, Rose, you've listened to two of the visionaries here. What do you think?
Well, this is why I've come to support the drainage fee. I see it just as a symbol to bring the religious community together, to get more education, to get more involved, and to call on the whole community behind this. You can't support the drainage fee and decide what you're going to do with that without getting involved in the whole continuum of needs in our community. And I think the religious community can be a force in advocacy as well as with dollars. And most of the leadership sit in the congregations in this community. So you have a broad group of people to educate and to bring forward, raise their awareness of it. I think people want to do something. But it's just going to have to be organized and coordinated, and the awareness is going to have to be raised.
You know, I know that you've been connected with, and Chuck also, and during my time in the pastorate, had reason to know about the Interfaith Hospitality Network, and how that has been on the scene now for several years, where churches cooperate to house up to, I think, 14 homeless families a week at a time and rotate around. And this is the kind of also symbolic gesture that's been happening within the, you used that word gesture, I think, earlier, that we realize this is just pointing in a direction rather than being but would you see, instead of 13 churches doing this, 130 churches doing this kind of thing? And
I think there's a need for, these are families well selected that have a potential of becoming self-sufficient. I mean, those are the ones that this International Hospitality Network can handle. I think that's only part of the homeless picture, but I know that there are more families out there that could do this. So there could, these 13 churches that do this, more than 13, but they're 13 weeks, and then they rotate back again in 13 weeks. They have case management, they have the children in the schools and the daycare. They look at the whole
This is
needs.
kind of tying in with the holistic approach you were talking about.
All right, yeah.
But these are people that have the potential to become self-sufficient with just a little help.
Ones who
So
have
there's
more...
a need for more of that, but there's also all this other part of the continuum.
Jackie, it seems to me I read in the paper that a good portion of Barbara Jordan's estate went to Hobo, and that's right next to City Hall.
Right.
Hobo, tell us about the relationships that you had with that particular addressing of homeless issues.
Oh, you mean with Hobo as an agency? Well, of course, you think about them a lot because they are right next door and you see them, and whenever you drive out on the street, you're going past the outside porch on the other side, and for me, it reminds me constantly of, I really need to be trying to find answers to this. Hobo itself, I think, is a really good agency, and speaking of emergency shelter, as we were a while ago in the really cold nights of November and December, Hobo was one of the agencies or groups that opened up their doors for folks to be able to spend the night that they don't normally. They have showers and daytime service, but now those folks, for instance, would not be able to go into the hospitality network because they were, I guess you might call them more hard case, not very many families, but, you know, perfectly able, most of them, to be able to return to society if the situation were there that they could grab a hold of. So I think Hobo plays a really important part because at different levels and different needs, different agencies have slightly different services. And if we keep somebody from getting so hopeless and so enveloped in the helplessness of being homeless, then that's a really critical portion. So Hobo's great. I think Hobo's great.
Okay, well, it's visible from that standpoint.
Yes.
Salvation Army puts folks up overnight in
Yeah.
the cold weather, and so we know that there's some response. I also think that the response to the young people, I know that you all have, I've had occasion to be in connection with the folks at the Congregational Church where they've worked with these youth who are at risk, runaways and so on, and you've shared in that.
Yes.
And one of the things I was interested to find out is that there's a pattern from New Orleans to Austin to Los Angeles
Right.
of
And
these
back
young
again.
people back and forth.
And back again.
And what's in just a minute or two we have left, what would you see as the direction in that?
It's what's happening to youth in this city and in this culture that really keeps me awake at night at times, because it seems that our country is kind of like an air conditioner with a filter that really needs cleaning. You know, and the filter continues to stack up and get more and more loaded with stuff, and the stuff is that we've got literally hundreds and thousands of youth on the streets. And they're armed, they're drug addicted, they're hopeless, and they're hostile. And that kind of growing population in our culture, that the main response in Texas is to build new prisons. It's a kind of bill that's going to come due one of these days, it seems to me.
Okay, so as
children are
a
in
down
trouble.
payment on a change, then, you all have been, at the University, Methodists have been trying to
We've been-
offer some services.
Yes.
And do you feel that sets an example of what some other churches can do?
I think it's strictly an emergency response, because if an adult needs intervention and help getting back on his feet, what does a 16-year-old kid need? You know, he or she needs much more than that, and we're just not providing it. It's not there. They're being treated as criminals.
Okay. Well, I think in the closing seconds here that we might be as realistic as we can about the depth and the extent of that need. At the same time, we realize that the Lord has given us creative powers that we've
Right.
scarcely begun to bring into
Exactly.
play. And that we can affirm that for a city that is as creative as Austin is.
Yes.
We've evidenced that in other ways. So
Yes.
you've evidenced that for us today by being here. And for your public service, Jackie Goodman, we're very grateful, and
Thank
as well
you.
as for your being with us today. Jack Merrill, you've
Thank you.
set an example in many ways over the years,
Thank
and
you,
we're
sir.
thankful for that, as have you, Rose Lancaster. And for you folks to look in today, we're glad that you joined us and hope that you'll be with us again next week on our next edition of Austin Faith Dialogue. I'm Richard Thompson, extending peace to you all.